Hello and welcome to another Gooner Ramble special. This time we have Akhil back, this time interviewing Rafael Honigstein. Before we jump into that, however, I want to quickly recap the interviews he has done with different journalists so far this season. You can go back and find these on our website, the Gooner Ramble. You can find them on iTunes or even YouTube. But going back to September 25th, we had probably, I think, what was my favorite interview with Julian Lorenz. On November 13th, we have the ever-popular interview with Neil Ashton. On December 3rd, we had Sammy Mockbell. And on December 15th, we had on Adrian Clark. So anyway, Akhil is back with Rafael Honigstein of The Guardian, of Talksport, of Suddeutsche Zeitung. I probably just butchered that German newspaper's name. I apologize. Anyway, here is Akhil with Rafa Honigstein.
We have Rafa Honigstein on today with us. Rafa, welcome.
Yes.
Hi. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very well as well. I think it's amazing what a win at Bournemouth can just do for your confidence. From 8 points behind, we're now 5 points behind with an opportunity to be 2 points behind. So life is a little bit brighter since I saw you last after the Chelsea game. Talking about sort of the title race, how do you see it at the moment? Who do you think are favourites? It was a big weekend, the weekend just gone, and it's also a big weekend coming up. How do you see things at the moment?
Well, I think Arsenal, as you said, have an incredible chance to get back right into it and perhaps even make themselves the team with momentum, the team that have something to lose again in this title race. A couple of weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, maybe slightly longer than that, when you beat Man City. Yeah. I think everybody felt that this is now Arsenal's title to lose, and in the meantime, you came close to losing it. It's not quite over yet, and I think there is still the question mark of Leicester. You know, how unscathed can they come through the next few weeks? And if there's a place where it is hard to escape with your defense intact, it is still the Emirates. So you've got an unbelievable chance this year. You've got a great chance on Sunday to close the gap and to put yourself almost in the driving seat again. So I think it's all down to Arsenal whether you'll take it or not.
Yeah, I mean, the game on Sunday is obviously a midday kickoff. It's you know, football in England especially, I think the earlier the kickoff, the dodgier the atmosphere seems to be. Do you think the atmosphere will play a big part sort of during the game? Because it's a huge game, and you would think if it was played at 4 o'clock or under lights, it would be a different game. Do you think the atmosphere will come into it, or do you think the players will be so focused, and even the fans will be quite up for this, even though it is an early kickoff?
Well, I mean, I'd be surprised if Arsenal fans weren't up for this. I mean, this is as close to a title decider, or, you know, in Germany we say sort of a pre-decider, right? Yeah. As you can get. And if you're not up for that game, then I don't think anyone can really help you. You know, you cannot always, I think, rely on the players to start like a house on fire and put 2 or 3 goals past your position the first 10 minutes. I think sometimes the spark has to come from the crowds first. And I do believe that one of the things that Arsenal have suffered from, in comparison to perhaps 1 or 2 other clubs, is that sense that the Emirates is, isn't really a hostile place to go. Of course, you know, you're going to be up against it in football terms, but chances are you'll hear your own fans singing most of the time. And I do believe that is not, that can only encourage an away team. And I think that's something that the board, but perhaps even the fans, have to work on.
Do Arsenal need a win if they are going to win the title? Or is a draw? What happened? You know, we're 5 points behind, so a win takes us 2 behind. A draw would obviously, we'll stay on 5. What realistically, I mean, for me, this is as close to a must-win as you'll get. But
yeah, it's not a must-win just yet, because if you have one of your customary strong finishes at the end of the season after getting knocked out in the last 16, you
cheeky.
well,
Well, we'll do well to get any further this year, I'll tell you that.
You might as well put pressure on Leicester, by a proxy, by finishing strongly and relying on them not to win everything. I think what mustn't happen, obviously, is a defeat, because 8 points at this stage would probably spell curtains. 2 points would give you an unbelievable chance. I think with 5 points, you're still totally in it.
Yeah. And, in the last sort of week or two, it's been quite noticeable that Arsene Wenger's seems to try to shift the sort of pressure. He's tried to play some mind games with Ranieri and Leicester. He started to say Leicester are favourites. He's even now said to the media that maybe now you'll take Leicester seriously. I think that's his way of hoping the media ramp up the pressure. How do you think Leicester will deal with that? And in the media, have you noticed a bit of a shift that actually people are taking notice and thinking, whoa, especially after they beat Man City, everyone in the media, are they now taking Leicester even more seriously, or were they always taking them seriously?
No, I think Leicester have been taken much more seriously now after the Man City game. Yeah. It was such a performance, such a state. And, 3-1 was flattering City. That was the crazy thing.
Yeah.
It could have been 4-5-0 easily. So, of course, you have to take them seriously. 13 games before the end of the season, they're 5 points clear. They haven't got any other games in any other competition. So, yeah, I mean, it could just happen. And with Wenger, I think it's a smart thing to do in a way. I'm also sometimes a little bit suspicious if this is not already sort of a start of managing his own supporters' expectations. This is my personal preference. Obviously, my outlook, being from Munich, is perhaps a little bit different, but I'd rather have my manager being really bullish and say, you know what, Leicester, enjoy yourselves there because we're going to come get you very quickly, than sort of talking them up. But, that's his style, I guess. I guess it's also honest to a certain extent, but it does serve a few purposes, I feel.
It's weird you say that, because 2 years ago, when Arsenal were sort of top of the league and obviously flirting with the league, Arsene Wenger did kind of say that, we are in this title race. He was a little bit more bullish, and that is obviously when the famous specialist in failure stuff started, because he was obviously asked about why are Chelsea and why are Liverpool keep saying they're not in it, and he obviously said that it's a fear to lose, whereas we're saying we are in it because we are in it, but so are they. And obviously the special failure started. And obviously that backfired very, very badly, because then I think about a week later we went to Liverpool, around this time last year, went to Liverpool and lost 5-1. So do you think perhaps past experience is in his mind a little bit as well, and he doesn't want to just totally commit, and at the same time he wants to put a bit of pressure on others? Well, what do you think he's, thinking? Do you think that's in his mind 2 years ago?
Yeah, it could well be. It could well be. Of course, I think he might also be hurt from earlier years where Arsenal, as you said, felt that they were in it, and he would, from memory, always refuse to rule out Arsenal, even when they were sort of 5-6 points behind, and say, it's not over yet, etc. And then people almost sort of started not taking him seriously in that respect. So, I mean, he's playing it cute. I don't blame him. I think it's a way to do it. I just think that Arsenal, after making the running for such a long time, and sort of being the best team in a football way in the league, it's I mean, as I said, it's a question of what you prefer, what works for your dressing room. He obviously feels that it works better if the pressure is on Leicester. Maybe he's seen that, the less than convincing results that Arsenal have had over the last couple of months. He feels that they've come about as a result of Arsenal maybe perhaps feeling that it's now their title to lose, and he wants to change the dynamic, relieve them of that pressure and coming from sort of underdog angle. I mean, these are things that might have 1 or 2% influence on what happens on the pitch.
Yeah.
And I think from talking to me that I always feel that there's bigger stuff at play, which ultimately has contributed to holding Arsenal back. And if they don't win it this year, I think once again you have to point at one of those fundamental shortcomings that still exist, in my view, with this team.
And do you want to expand on that? What do you think they are, just for our listeners' benefit?
Well, I think it's something that you can always read between the lines when you listen to Arsenal players, to former Arsenal players, talk about what Wenger does really well, or hear them talk about what other coaches do really well, or compare him to other coaches. And the word that always comes up with Wenger is freedom. I mean, players love it, because especially attacking players, he sends them out, he says, okay, this is your sort of starting position, this is what I want you to do, but after that you just express yourself, you enjoy yourself, you facilitate beauty, as he himself would.
Yeah.
And that's great. I mean, players love that. Players absolutely love that. But and just to expand on that, and I think if you've never experienced management in any other way, if you've never had a manager who actually tells you, yeah, it's great to express yourself, but I want you to do this because I've scouted your position and I saw that if you do this, you'll have a better chance of winning than just doing your own thing. Do this and do it again and do it a third time and maybe the fifth time and then maybe the sixth time it will work. It is a bit more demanding of players, but talking to some of these guys who have had different experiences with different type of coaches, who then come into a system where there is a lot of freedom, my sense is that they find that it's not quite enough. That they find that there needs to be more, especially if you come up against teams of similar individual quality, but who collectively seem to do stuff just a little bit better. And these can be minute things that you don't really notice when you're sitting on the stadium, because you're looking at the ball, you're not really looking at what other 18 players are doing at the time. But, just teams making sure that, for example, the worst players always has the ball, or moving teams into into certain areas of the game, pockets of the game where they want them to be, just by positioning themselves and by moving as a unit. It's the opposite of freedom, but it can have a very dramatic effect when it comes to marginal gains. And I think this is something that Wenger doesn't do. Whether he doesn't believe in it or whether he feels that the players are better to be left alone with that sort of stuff, it's hard to say. And of course, you can always say, he's had a level of success, a sustained level of success with his methods, so why change? But I firmly believe that with the team that he has had for the last 2-3 years, he should be doing better. And in my view, one of the reasons why he isn't doing better is because he doesn't really manage the details well. Look at what Peter Cech was saying before the first Chelsea game. He was asked, why did Chelsea always win against Arsenal?
Yeah.
I think he had to be very careful of how he put it, but he said, we managed the details really well. And I think that tells you a lot.
Mm.
And a lot of the former players are very diplomatic, and they owe Wenger a lot, and they'll never publicly criticize him or say something that can be seen as a slight on him, or but there comes usually a time in conversation where they sort of say, well, he let us do our stuff, and I just don't think that's quite enough anymore in the way that football has evolved over the last 5-10 years. You've gone very quiet there.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of listening to you and thinking about it, and I can't remember who it was, but I was talking to someone recently, who was just talking about those details, and they kind of hinted that there's been a little bit more of it recently than there was.
Yes, that's definitely true.
And it was something about, it could have even been you. I really can't remember who it was, but they were saying that they study sometimes, they study the opposition goalkeeper, and they tell Olivier Giroud, all right, when the keeper has it on his left foot, press, but when he has it on his right, get the left back, because that's where, stats wise, that's where he seems to go. There was something like that. I can't remember who it was. But I found that fascinating. Obviously, whether it's true or not is another question. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's a conversation we had, and this is something I hadn't noticed because I've only started looking at these details 3 or 4 years ago, because you're just not really aware of it. You see why you see things happening, but you're not quite sure why they're happening.
Yeah.
And then you talk to a coach, and he explains to you, look. There's no real pressing. There's one guy maybe pressing the ball, but the others are not. Or why the Giroud example was a guy on a guy who is a qualified coach.
Oh, so it was you telling me this?
Yeah.
Oh, right, sorry.
I was watching Giroud pressing the defender on the wrong leg. By the wrong leg, I mean
he's weaker
on his weak leg, which he should never do, because it means he's got the ball on his good leg, and he's just much likelier to play a proper pass on his good leg. So it's these little things. I mean, in Germany, I'm not exaggerating to say that this is something that 13, 14-year-olds are now routinely, as one of the earliest things that you learn are to make use of that small margins. And it's like sort of total second nature. And at Arsenal, until recently, and I agree with you, things are changing. Until recently, these sort of things just weren't paid attention to.
Yeah. We'll move the conversation on a little bit to Arsenal's 2 German players. We've obviously, Mesut Ozil has had a very good season. I think most people would agree. Himself, when I came back from Bournemouth, I happened to see the Sky interview with him, and he was pretty honest in it that, his first season he was still settling. His second season he had an injury, but this season he feels a lot happier and stuff. How do you assess Mesut Ozil's season so far? And then on the back of that, Per Mertesacker, he since his sending off, he hasn't played. He was obviously suspended for the first game, but he's found himself on the bench, and probably likely to be on the bench against Leicester, you would think, with Jamie Vardy's pace. Maybe Gabriel is more suited. But how do you think both their seasons are going, and what sort of part do you think they both have to play going forward this season?
Well, I think with Mesut Ozil, until sort of Christmas, or maybe just after Christmas, I think he was on course of being the nailed-on player of the year. But because he's gone, by his standards, a little bit missing, I think it's much harder now to make that argument. And I think now is really the time, now until the end of May, for him to make this team his team, and by extension, make the league his league, and possibly the title as well. And, it's because we know that he can do it, we expect him to live up to his own standards.
Do you think he will do it?
Well, it's hard to say, because with him, you never really quite know. The problem is that we all know he's got it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't always consistently put it on the pitch. And that is that sense of frustration that I think that people have with him. He's got so much talent that you want to see it applied at all times. And he suffers when Arsenal don't have the ball. Arsenal suffer a lot when he's not on the ball.
Yeah.
And I think there is, even before he signed, I think there was a sense that he is going to make Arsenal more Arsenal. And mostly in a good sense. But perhaps also when it doesn't quite work for them, also in a slightly bad sense. And that's what's happening. And I think it's down to him, how that equation will work out at the end of the season.
What sort of players does Mesut Ozil need around him to be Mesut Ozil? In terms of, when he's at his best, what sort of players does he need around him? And do Arsenal have those players?
I think Arsenal do have those players. I think with Sanchez coming in, with Giroud being a much better footballer, I think he's really progressed a lot. He finds it easier to shine. Also, don't forget, you look at, I think Dortmund is always a good example. You look at Dortmund players and they all look brilliant, but it's not really that they're all that good. It's just collectively the team works so well. People are moving. They find each other because the runs are choreographed. Everybody looks a better player as a result. And Özil has that talent to make others look better. And in a functioning team, he will add something that's amazing. But Arsenal aren't always functioning, and then he himself is not really the guy who sort of then necessarily stems the tide. And I think that is the problem, in inverted commas, with him. He needs players who are quick, who are technical, who know when to go, when to stay. He can play with, because the one thing with Özil at all times is you can play with him. He will give you the ball. He will take it. He's not going to lose it. He'll give it back. And, for Germany, his influence was subtle at the World Cup relatively to his own previous showings. But it was very important because Germany knew that the ball was safe with him at all times. And he played that role quite brilliantly. And for Arsenal, though, he needs a bit more because he is the main guy, or he has become the main guy, which, shows you just how good it is. But then, as we know from the comic books, with great power comes great responsibility.
And by the way, on Dortmund, I had a 10-fold accumulator on the weekend, and Dortmund were the only team to let me down. I think they drew 0-0 away from home. Bugger. Yeah. Per Mertesacker.
Yeah, I think Mertesacker, until the sending off, has actually played a fantastic season. I think he's been almost flawless. We know that he's not going to be the paciest defender, but he is so...
Why does he not get the credit he deserves, do you think? Because, I mean, if you think he's been flawless, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just... It seems like he doesn't get the credit. Why do you think that is? Is it because of that lack of pace, and is it that... I don't know. What do you think?
I think his style is not really appreciated by average English punter. Okay. They want John Terry. They want somebody who's bleeding, who's making goal line clearances, who's clattering opposition strikers. Mertesacker only gets noticeable when he doesn't do anything well. Yeah. And that's why everybody thinks slow, or, he's late or whatever, because he does all the little things when the ball is miles away. He does it so well that you just don't see it. I mean, there's the problem of defenders that they're always sort of undervalued to a certain extent because they do the stuff that nobody sees. The only memorable occasions are usually when they do something wrong. But you look at his numbers, his passing, which is unbelievable, and the way that he always actually plays. Usually, the first ball always goes forward with him. He always finds the number 6, the number 8 central midfielder. Yeah. He finds the wide fullback who's gone up to start the attack. So he's so important, and he does a lot of talking. Again, we talked about the freedom that Wenger gives his players. Freedom relies on players like Mertesacker to use that freedom constructively and help others, who might not have the same confidence or experience. And I think that's the reason why he's become so important. And I think Gabriel, who by all accounts is not a great communicator, might be a better athlete.
Yeah.
Is probably not favored or hasn't been favored by Wenger because he doesn't really bring that extra level of organization that Mertesacker brings. So I think the discussion about Arsenal, when you follow it on social media over the last few years, has always concentrated on single players. Saying, okay, we're not winning the league because we don't have a world-class striker. We're not winning the league because we don't have a world-class holding midfielder. We're not winning the league because we have a world-class centre-back. I think it's the wrong way to look at things. I think you need to look at a team. If the team works well, you can win without a world-class striker. If the team works well, defends well, you don't have to have the best centre-backs in the world. If you have a holding midfielder who is not the one guy holding, but is holding with everybody else when you don't have the ball, things look very different. So I think that collectively it's been an issue rather than singling out individual players. And for 10, 15 years, well, no, 15 not, but ever since the Invincibles.
Yeah, about 10.
We've always had that kind of debate, if only we had this player, if only we had that player, if only we had a new Vieira, if only we had a new Henry, or a new goalkeeper. Yeah, I mean, these things, of course, they're all important, but it's much more important how you function as a team, and teams have won without, world-class strikers and without world-class goalkeepers. It can happen. But I think sometimes the bigger picture gets lost a little bit. And I think the biggest picture with Mertesacker is, of course, that he needs a bit of protection, like most centre-backs do. I don't want to go on and on about it, but there's a great stat I read the other day, which said that centre-backs, the best centre-backs in the business, win 66% of their 1v1s. That means effectively that 1 in 3 times they're beaten.
Yeah.
So the key to being a good centre-back is not to get into that 1v1 in the first place. And Mertesacker has a great talent of not getting into these situations, but that's not being appreciated because you cannot see situations that don't arise.
Who do you think plays on Sunday at the back?
Well, I think if they play their usual system with Vardy being sort of 50 meters ahead of everybody else and looking to break, it would make a lot of sense to say, pair. Sit this one out.
Yeah.
I think there isn't a single team in the Premier League that breaks as well as Leicester.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it was very clear to see against City that this is, it's not a coincidence that they break so well. These are not fantastic players. You think, oh yeah, Mahrez, wonderful, Vardy, great, Okazaki, wonderful, but they're actually not wonderful players. But they play really well together. Vardy starts running and Okazaki immediately drags a defender wide, creates space. I mean, everything is drilled. They play as a team, and that's why they seem to be doing so well. You can really see it if you watch their runs. It's all automatic. It's not freedom. It's not improvisation. It's all from the training pitch. And against an Arsenal team that don't always have the right balance, when it comes to coming back, I think it would make a lot of sense playing Gabriel. Also, Germany made that decision eventually in the World Cup when they said, okay, we can play a slightly higher line without Mertesacker. It's just a fact of life. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised unless Wenger feels that he needs another big player because of the area threat that Leicester undoubtedly possess from that whole situation. So it's always a bit of a trade-off, but yeah, I can see why he would make the decision not to play pair on that occasion.
Yeah, I mean, I think having Francis Coquelin back also would be he's obviously been in the squad the last 3 games. Wenger said he wasn't quite physically there last week, but you would expect him to start as well. I think it's a big game for him as well. But yeah, it's exciting. Just finally, we've had a lot of media coverage on ticket pricing and the Liverpool protest, which then got talked about on Match of the Day. It's got talked about on most newspapers. It is pretty much the talk of the town at the moment. What's your view? And this is, obviously Liverpool were focusing on home ticket pricing, but there's been a lot about away ticket pricing, a potential £30 cap, which all the Premier League teams were asked to vote on. There's another meeting in March. What's your view on it? What have you heard? What do you think? How does it compare to Germany? And what do you think will happen ultimately?
Well, I mean, the comparison with Germany is always a little bit skewed because you don't have standing terraces. So
yeah, true.
Of course, prices will always be cheaper. The protests in Germany are against standing tickets being too expensive. People say it shouldn't cost more than €20. So I think we have to put things into context a little bit. I think what's happened in the Premier League is, or what is beginning to happen is that after really putting up with almost everything or anything over the last few years, fans get to the point where they say, this is just no longer realistic. We're just being asked to keep paying over the odds when the importance of ticket money to the clubs is all the time decreasing. So why not give a bit back? And I can understand. I think clubs for a long time have really just used supporters as customers. I think supporters feel that it's not really their club as a consequence, that they're just asked to pay but have very little input. I mean, Arsenal in many ways are one of the better ones because you have the AST, because you have a Q&A, there is still some interaction. And some level of accountability, even if it's just superficial. But at most clubs, what do you do if you're Man United fan or City or City are pretty good in that respect, but just generally speaking, what do you do if you have no one to talk to?
Yeah.
And I think people get upset and they decided, we no longer put up with this. And the fact that Liverpool are looking as if they might listen will, of course, only, I think, encourage other fans to take a similar stand. And I think it's long overdue. I think in other countries it would have happened probably much earlier. And I think it's right that this happens right now. And, just on a bigger, just before I go, just on a bigger note, I think what Leicester are doing with a relatively low budget team and the ticket pricing and the TV money, it all sort of, I think, feeds into this sense or this tinge or this feeling that maybe the way that the Premier League and the way that even fans have said, we need more money, money. That's what we need. That's the important thing. That decides if we win. That decides everything. I think people are beginning to step back from that a little bit and see, what? Money isn't everything. It shouldn't be. You can be successful with less money. You shouldn't squeeze the last penny out of supporters. Let's go back to being a bit more responsible when it comes to looking after our fans. And I think that's what's beginning to happen, and I hope that it'll continue.
I mean, I think Arsene Wenger would agree with you in terms of, you know, I know we've spent money on Sanchez, on Ozil, but, you know, if in this current squad, if they do go on to win the league, then there's been some real gems in that as well. You know, you think of sort of someone like Francis Coquelin hasn't cost any money. Aaron Ramsey came relatively young. Olivier Giroud, Nacho Monreal were really good buys. So I think, I mean, you're right. I think Leicester have proven that perhaps money's not everything. And I mean, if you had told me Robert Huth and Morgan would be centre-backs who would be top of the league at the start of the season, I would have laughed because, you know, Robert Huth came from Chelsea. I mean, yeah, he went to Stoke, but he came from Chelsea. Morgan's kind of been around. It's bizarre, actually, how well they've done. And I think it has been a breath of fresh air. And obviously I would love them to be second in the league behind Arsenal.
Of course.
Rafa,
It goes back to what we talked about earlier. You take Robert Hood or Mahrez, any of these guys, or Drinkwater, and you put them at Chelsea or City now, they wouldn't have a big impact.
Yeah.
Leicester City work as a team, and that's why players look very good. It's not the other way around.
Yeah. And they look like they're enjoying it so much as well, which I think is important, that they seem to, they're not fearful, and that maybe comes down to that pressure and, I mean, mentality as well, maybe. I mean, Thierry Henry talked about Arsenal's mentality, but I think the Leicester mentality is very much, we see what happens, you know, if you look at what Mahrez said after the game, we didn't expect to win here, we have. Happy days, you know, but there's still a long way to go. We'll try and win our next game, so they're very much pressure mentality. I think that might come into it a little bit now, and you know we'll kind of see what happens. But it's certainly an interesting race. I always end with about 3 very quick fire questions, literally just yes or no or one word answers. So I'll just kick off. Will Arsenal win the league?
Ask me again a couple of weeks' time. Honestly, I don't know. The honest answer is I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Will Arsenal win the FA Cup?
No.
Will Arsenal... I think I know the answer to the next one. Will Arsenal beat Barcelona in over 2 legs?
No.
Yes. Fair. I think that's kind of fair. Who will win the Player of the Year in England?
That's another really hard one.
Tough, isn't it? And also,
it's changing all the time. That's the issue.
I mean, coincidentally, with the PFA Players Player of the Year, they obviously, I think, vote in March. So they'll be voting literally at the end of this month, start of next month. So it's interesting there as well. But obviously, when I mean Player of the Year, I mean sort of the writers, the ones that are voted later on.
I think, you know, the Player of the Year will have to be the player of the championship winning team. I think people want to wait as long as possible to make that decision. If Leicester somehow win or even finish second, I think it's almost not impossible to give it to a Leicester player. I think you have to almost do it.
Mahrez? Would it be Mahrez?
Could be Mahrez, could be Vardy. I mean, Ozil is definitely in the mix. I think Aguero is still in the mix. He's been overlooked in the past.
Yeah.
If City come back strongly, it'll only be down to him, and I think he still has got a good chance.
Yeah.
And I've also think that Cech has an outside chance.
Yeah. If Arsenal win the league, I think Cech would have a massive chance.
I think he could be sort of, when you see at the Oscars, you know, somebody who gets an Oscar, even if the film wasn't that great, but they wanted to give him to him for so many years.
Yeah. Just taking the opportunity.
I think that's why Cech will have a lot of votes for him. But yeah, it's down to Arsenal winning, I think.
Okay, Rafa, that's it from me. Sorry we went over by 10 or so minutes, but it was just so fascinating listening to you. I look forward to having you on in a few more weeks, obviously, to just tell me who you're going to vote for in the Player of the Year vote.
I will do.
Cool. Rafa, thank you very much, and we'll hopefully speak to you soon.
Okay, cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate. Up the Arsenal.